My work at Pratt was a good paying job. It paid well. It was kind of miserable though, and it was not a sustainable career. I wrote jet engine assembly instructions, and they were for unionized mechanics. Now, unionized mechanics are a dying breed. They're getting more and more replaced by robot arms for manufacturing engineering. So I decided to segue off into robot arms. I mean, it makes sense from my point of view. But I had to learn how to computer program. So for the first 2 months or so of the summer, I was studying Python. Python's a computer programming language conducive to robotic arms. I've been getting help from a variety of robotics engineers, well, not robotics engineers, but computer scientists in this regard, one of whom is a robotics engineer. So, computer programming, robotics, Python. Okay, yeah, so another man I talked to, he's like, yeah, you can go into these like programming boot camps, but you really need to do a project to showcase your ability. And I kind of like stowed that thought away in my head because it would take me a while to learn the programming I need, and now I have a baseline foundation of Python. So anyway, that thought stowed away in my head. I'd finally finished my Python like baseline skills on a site called codeacademy.com, and I thought to myself, like, what do I want to do now? But I was spending a lot of money living in Middletown. I didn't really like living in Middletown. I was making more and more friends in New Haven. So I kind of had this thought, well, I think I'd like to move to New Haven, but ultimately where would I want to be? I've always had this conception that I'd love to live in Scotland. Several people told me about the very nice people there, the living situation. You know, I thought about my ancestry. I thought about the poet Robert Burns, who my great-great-great-grandfather has like 2 volumes of, and they're all tattered and shit, but I ended up rebinding them in New Haven. So yeah, I went to Scotland. I loved it. I met a lot of people. I met a poet from Connecticut, believe it or not. I met musicians. I met people on the street. I tasted haggis. I liked haggis. I knew what haggis was already. I got giant beers from Scottish pubs. I'm like a regular at a place called 1780 Rose. The photography is so easy because almost everything is just so beautiful. My wallet and phone ended up getting stolen. My Scottish phone, which was freaking god awful, and it really got bad. After I went to Cambridge, borrowed money from my friend Jake, who's a theoretical physicist. Awesome. Who's a theoretical physicist, and I was like hanging out with all his Cambridge friends in suits and shit, and then I left. And I was on this train to go meet up with Antonia Walker, and Antonia was really hard to reach, mostly because it was so hard for me to communicate from my phone. I didn't convey how shitty my situation was, but I didn't really want to beg either. But oh my god, I was walking the streets of London, and I wrote a whole poem about how I got out of the situation, and that I'll have to record later. But I believe me, it's worth it. I wrote 4 poems in the United Kingdom. One of them was called Contrast, because it's just like it's so beautiful, but like you hear people say something so beautiful and it's like, yeah, whatever. Because, you know, everything, this is beautiful, that's beautiful, but when you go and you sit on those hills overlooking Edinburgh, and I have like a picture of my little composition notebook here in Edinburgh, there's a degree of contrast that you have to kind of acknowledge. So I wrote a poem called Contrast for that, and I wrote a poem right before going called Happiness, which is the one I read recently at a place called the Happiness Lab, which actually totally fits with the philosophy of the poem about kind of working toward a goal. And I was happy to read that out loud in New Haven. I'm jumping around in timeline, but it's hard for me not to. Let's see what else. Another poem I wrote in Scotland was called The Corporatization of Skolovich, which was about a childhood fear of mine. A witch kind of like, you know, like the monster in my closet. Well, I try to say this with humility. I have a very strong imagination, and that strong imagination can imagine terrifying things, especially to a child. And that's what the corporalization of Skolovich is about, and how Charlie, thank you Charlie, my older brother, helped me with it. You should see the poem about him sometime. And speaking of childhood, I'm about to revamp a poem called Two Mystic, which is about Two Mystic Lane, the street I grew up on. Okay, so let's see. Blah blah blah. Me. What I'm doing now. I've missed stuff. Wait. Oh yeah. There's also like. I felt kind of down at one point while I was in Edinburgh. Actually, right before my wallet got stolen. I wrote a boast, which is an embellishment of me. It made me feel better. Oh yeah. So. I eventually leave London, right? I get a variety of pictures. I met up with a friend of mine from the video gaming world named Emilio Del Grasso, and, or Emil, I don't know. I think it's Emilio, but he goes by Emil on the internet. So I got to enjoy, like, actually seeing him for 20 minutes. He's a doctor. He plays medic, of course. So, let's see. Plane ride home. Things go well. I moved out of Middletown. I moved all my shit to Darien. And as I was moving my shit to Darien, the garage was a bit of a cacophony. So I indexed a variety of the items that were in there. So it's kind of like a baseline for organization for the garage. This was actually really, really hard to do. And I knew it wouldn't be well received, but I knew it was worth it. So at least we've got kind of a foundation of organization for that garage of stuff. But let's see, the garage. Oh, I stumbled across a lot of cool pictures, and I just took pictures of some of my favorite nostalgia that I saw in there, and I made a little Facebook album called Tripping on Nostalgia, because like I was like tripping all over this shit, and it's also like a reference to acid, and it's funny. So, let's see. Finished doing that. Found a place in New Haven. A friend of mine named Taya sent me a message about this place that was opening up. It's $425 a month. Utilities are included. Heat is included. I think that there's some... I'm like looking for something to find wrong about this place, but there isn't. I just think the guy's really not trying to make a profit. He just likes living with nice people. My next door neighbor / like housemate, like it's a house with a bunch of individual locks on the doors. So my neighbor, who's like my housemate, he made food the other day. It was really good. It was like authentic Indian cuisine. His name's Bono, and Anusha, who also lives on the same floor, joined us for dinner. We had dinner together. It was wonderful. They're both computer programming savvy, so when I have questions concerning Python, I'm sure they'll help. Okay, so last thing here is my plan going forward. I figured out a project I want to do, because, okay, so first of all, I want to learn how to play the harp, and that's not just like a meandering ambition. I've wanted to do that for a long time, but you know, first thing you need about playing the harp is a harp. That's hard to get, because it's expensive, and I couldn't really justify getting it so soon, but I just bought a kit, an assembly kit for like pre-cut pieces of wood to build a harp. Good thing I was an assembly manufacturing engineer, because that should make a lot of sense to me. I've actually already read all the instructions and watched the videos, and it is, as of yesterday, in the mail. So I have that harp coming. I've started to look into robotic arm, like hand assemblies, like actual appendage mimicking robot arm pieces that, you know, literally look like people's hands, because my project-based learning that I'm going to do is going to be a player harp. So a player harp would be kind of like a player piano. It plays itself. So if I just program in a song to these little robot hands, they will play a harp. So imagine just having like a harp sitting on your dining room table playing songs for you. I think that's amazing, because the sound of actual strings rather than that of a speaker is something I really truly appreciated when I went to the Yale Philharmonic Orchestra 2 weeks ago. And it's just like you close your eyes and you're in heaven. So yeah, that's the story now. This Python application, this computer programming project-based learning with the harp is not going to be easy, but it is going to be educational, and it is something I can showcase to anyone who would be interested in hiring me, if assuming, you know, I can't just sell player harps and make a bunch of money. Goodbye, everyone.